It's August, right? August, Brisbane Web Design Group. My name's Bruce Morrison. I'm one of the organisers of the group. Just quick show of hands, who is this their first time along to a Brisbane Web Design? Great. Well, welcome. A bit of information about the group. We're a bunch of volunteers. We put these things on once a month. The speakers are all volunteers, so everything we do is out of our own time. So we're always looking for people to volunteer, to help run the group, to present, provide any kind of support with appeals that we have going on. We'll ask people for help on the mailing list and sponsorship. I do quite a lot of the organising, and I'm actually going overseas for the next 3 months. So the guys that are here, there's Leon and Ben up the back and Angus in the middle. If you'd like to help out, either by giving a talk, helping organise the group, and it's not a big onus on actually doing it. There's a group of people here and a lot of support. So if you'd like to help out and come and see one of us, and we'll let you know how you can. So if you're looking at giving a talk, I think both September and October we don't have any speakers for at this stage. So this is a word cloud of some terms that come from a survey that we did at the end of last year. So if you're thinking of giving a talk, there's some good topics. Also going through the last meetups this year, just to see what people have actually presented on, just to see kind of what the tone is. We're quite broad. We do a lot of technical stuff. Last month we had legal talks and mailing lists. We do HTML, responsive design, that type of stuff. So there's quite a lot of topics you can talk on, and any of the organisers are happy to help and shape any talk you want to give. We've got a form up on the web that basically gets some of your bio information and what you actually want to talk about. So if you're interested, for a good place to start is by filling out this form. The next meetup is 20th September. As I said, we don't have any speakers at this point, but come and see Ben or Angus or Leon if you are interested, and we can help get that organised. The group's actually on the web in a number of places. The majority of our activity goes on meetup.com. There's a mailing list there and quite a good community around that. Twitter's the other place that we do advertise what we're doing and what's going on. And we use the hashtag BNEWeb. So if you want to tweet what's going on tonight with some photos or some comments, feel free to do that and use the hashtag BNEWeb. And there's also a LinkedIn group, which is a good place to connect professionally with people and post jobs and stuff like that. We couldn't do what we do without the generous help of our sponsors. The Edge provide the venue, this wonderful venue, and the tech support that goes around setting up and putting on one of these events. And Matter Solutions have been a long-time sponsor for years and years, have sponsored the meetup group and the website hosting, and also volunteered lots of time to help organising the group. So there's a few other events that we've been asked to talk about that you might be interested in. That camp is talking about how humanities and technologies integrate, and that's happening here on the 25th of August. It's free, so you just need to register. There's a big user experience conference that's happening at the end of the month here in Brisbane. It's a great opportunity to not have to travel and come and see some wonderful speakers. And if you're into web design, there's Web Directions South is happening in October. It's down in Sydney, but it's well worth the visit. The guys that put on Web Directions are actually doing they do this little road show and a mini kind of meetup event. I think it's on the 30th of August. It's free. They get a bunch of people that are local to talk. I think it's for 5 minutes. So it's a fast-paced, exciting evening. There's free drinks and nibbles. It often sells out. So, well, the last one sold out. So, and this one will as well. So if you're either interested in speaking or going, let me know, and I'll pass your details on to the organisers. All these events I'll send out in a wrap email early next week. So if you're interested, you can look them up. So this evening we have a drink sponsor to sign up to, and that's great, presented by Brendan down the front. So if you have any questions about, I guess it's marketing tools, email, SMS, mobile, come and see Brendan afterwards. He'll give a bit of a talk at the evening, but he sign up to putting on drinks and nibbles and also providing the room. It's a great opportunity to actually come and speak to the people that are here in a quite relaxed atmosphere. We have a separate room at the Fox Hotel upstairs, so we're out of the noise of the regular pub, so we don't get annoyed by the normal patrons. So it's a great part of the evening to come along to. So that's at the Fox Hotel, so it's up around the corner. There'll be a bit of a conga line of people after the talks are finished. So if you don't know where you're going, let us know. It's upstairs and they'll have signs about. All right, well, without any further ado, I'd like to invite James up to speak on some wonderful gadgets that he has and the user experience elements of those. Thanks, Sam.
Good evening, everybody. I put the word fat in there because usually it attracts attention. And I think we can all identify with being stressed, and I'll have a chat about what data curious means as well. But this is really born out of both a profession and a passion for me. And I'll start by saying I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer. I've done a lot of HCI in my life, but I don't really know my way around a cascading style sheet. There's plenty of people in this audience that I've had to turn to over email, including Bruce in the last few weeks, to ask for questions about web pages. So I'm not that kind of guy, but what my profession is as a psychologist, and it's about thoughts and feelings and behaviours, and about measuring that, and about understanding that, and about not only the maelstrom of thoughts and feelings that we have and that even users have when they're using the things that we and you guys design, but also the habits that we have in our lives, the good and the bad habits, in this case smoking and alcohol, but everything we do, thoughts, feelings and behaviours is my territory. Right down to how the brain works, and in this case the area of the brain that relates to impulse control and whether we decide to have that durry or have that drink. And a lot of what I talk about and a lot of what I hear when I talk to people is I hear discussions about cause and effect in thoughts, feelings and behaviours. And people have biases. People have all sorts of cognitive biases, and I'm going to show you 3 or 4 here, but there's actually about 60 that psychologists have identified. Biases in seeing patterns and in seeing information that we think confirms what we know, and in correlations. And why am I talking about this? Because fundamentally what I'm talking tonight is about how to measure thoughts, feelings and behaviours in people and help them change their behaviours, and how to put that into an interface and one that people are going to use. But I'll start with a story. As a psychologist, my core thing is how to measure behaviour, and as I came through psychology, it's about using paper and pencil and talking to people. But I started off in a different way. I did a lot of R&D research for the military, and I was really used to plugging in devices onto soldiers and people in the military, early Palm pilots and things like that, and getting information out of them. And usability in that environment 10 years ago was very different. Warwick Kay is going to talk about how we measure usability. But for me, I knew something had poor usability when a soldier came back to me with a Palm pilot and the stylus was impaled through the screen, because that was their way of saying, mate, this isn't going to work. But it was part of how I had tried to measure behaviour. And we always thought it ended up something like this, and we're not too far off that. After I left R&D research and human computer action in the military, I went and did business psychology. And again, the core tools that I used were using paper and talking to people. And this was a lot of human resources and a lot of coaching of people and employee satisfaction surveys. But I'd come across managers in early days of BlackBerries who'd say, mate, stop giving me these surveys, I'm busy, put it on my BlackBerry. Give me the information that I'm meant to be filling out and put it on there if you want to know about my thoughts, my feelings and my behaviours. And that got me thinking back to my military research days. I then had a period where I went to more traditional psychology, as some of you might think about it, and putting people on the couch and talking to people about what's going on in their life and helping them reach further aspirations and helping people make sense of the things that are going on in their lives. And I also had some time doing psychology, and I still do some of this, where we talk about some pretty serious and some difficult things, about people that are having difficulties with their brains and their minds and their lives, about some very serious things. And in general, some of the problems that people face. And it was also through this period that there was someone who'd come through my door and they were trying to deal with a particular mood disorder in their life and some depression. And what I found was, just like the rest of psychology, the way we help people with this is we give them a piece of paper, like a mood diary, and we get them to record information on their mood, with perhaps 10 feeling on top of the world, almost too high and on top of the world, and 1 being perhaps suicidal, probably as bad as you can imagine, and putting in little dots for their mood. And you can see that this was something that would cover a month, and you'd occasionally see these patterns and there'd be little notes, but it's very hard to work out what's going on in amongst the chaos and confusion of your life. And I found myself looking around and reflecting on the journey I'd had with using technology to measure people's behaviour, and seeing mobile was everywhere, and seeing that their data and being able to fill in data about yourself was everywhere, and that people were wearing all sorts of devices like Fitbits, and that the disruption of technology was making those much more available to people. And I was back in the military, but this time in uniform. And I was also seeing big organisations put a lot of investment into their own app stores and their own ways of measuring people's thoughts, feelings and behaviours. And so I found myself thinking, was there a better way? Was there a better way of measuring this in my profession and more generally? And there was. There was a very good app that was out there that synced between smartphone and mobile device and the web and a web client and a Windows client, and let us measure exactly the sorts of things that my profession says we should be measuring, and lets us visualise beautiful dashboarded data about what's going on in someone's life with their mood and their coping and their exercise and diary entries. A very rich information that helps people work out cause and effect in their lives, and helped me as a psychologist do that. And helped people understand that although there'd be dips in their life, there would be periods where things were pretty well. Now, the thing was, that wasn't a client that had come through my door, that was actually a family member. It was a family member with a serious mental illness. And so part of it was born out of a passion and love and caring to try and find a good user experience for this person to make sense of their life, and for me as a family member to help them. But in doing that, I also came across a lot of professional reflections on what good user experience means for that. And as I dug deeper and further, became aware that there was a whole ethos that was developing around use of mobile and around measuring yourself. Quantified self, and some people may follow quantified self. Maybe you want to call it self-tracking. And this was a conclusion I came to, was that behaviour change was occurring, and maybe I wasn't involved as an expert, and I didn't like that. I thought that as a psych, as someone with a background in this, I needed to be on top of that. And so I found myself thinking that paper and pencil wasn't the best way. But what I found was that the App Store was chaotic, it was a bit of jungle, it was hard to work out what the good apps were and what skilled understanding meant. And I still see this a bit in the UX world as well. It's recognised that there's some good apps, and you'll have emails come across your desk every week, and you'll have people say, this is a good app, mate, this is a good app for tracking. But there needs to be some principles underneath that help us understand why those are good apps and how we can replicate that in order to help people track and measure their lives and understand and change their lives if they want to. And that's why I set up a company that I did, to help health professionals do that, and to work with web developers and app developers and designers in the UX space to do that, and to run training and to run consultancy. And so I started surrounding myself with all these devices and also working out what the best ones were. And I've tried most of the ones here. Some of them are up and coming, and I'll be giving some examples from that tonight. That's really the bumper sticker message that comes through. But what is self-tracking? Well, we have plenty of self-trackers in the audience tonight. Twitter is a way of tracking yourself. It's unfiltered thought, if you want to think about it like that. Brendan does some unfiltered thought. And I don't know how he's feeling right now about having a psychologist on stage make mention of the fact that I'm interested in that he was strangely excited at one stage. But he tracks. Angus tracks. He's on LinkedIn. I can look on LinkedIn and I can see who Angus was meeting. He's recording his life and what he's doing, as are many of you. And then at this other end, there's a whole continuum of people that are using these devices, using these devices and getting much more rich information about their lives. Angus also collects data on Zio and sleep, and we'll be having a bit of a look at that a bit later as well. This is self-tracking, and these are some of the industries that you may be asked to develop for, or you may see opportunities for developing for. It's very big in safety critical industries, and I do a lot of work in that. It's very big in the military. And by safety critical, I mean any industry where how people think or feel or act might endanger themselves or others. The middle space is one that is seen as having a lot of potential, but there's a number of cultural barriers, and that's really around health, around consumers using these and then taking the information to their doctors or to people like myself. And then finally, you've got the consumer world down the bottom. Now, how you approach these and how you brand it and the sort of experience you provide is going to be different for each one. But who are the users? Sometimes the users are people like this who are just data curious. They're people who just want to measure information. They want to cover themselves like Inspector Gadget in all sorts of devices. And I'm not one of those people, but as I was saying to Angus on the way in, I've had to do it as part of understanding this. It's not a pretty picture. I look like, my wife told me I look like an alien overlord before I come to bed because of the devices I have on my head and all over my body, such as this and these. But they're people who are naturally just interested in information, and they might not have a great motivation to change, necessarily to learn to change, but they just want to get the information. We then have people, and a lot of the fitness crowd is like this, who are tracking and measuring their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviours because they're trying to hack their life. It's almost like the life hacker crowd that you see, that are really trying to get that level of improvement. And then you have people who are maybe trying to do this out of a desire for control because they're sick and things are overwhelming and confused, and anyone who's had any issues with chronic illness or illness that they've had trouble with would understand this. It's trying to find a way of coping and understanding what's going on. And there's family members that tie into that as well, because family members can be a great user of this, and as a family member of someone with a mental health issue, I can sit on the train and I can read the diary that they're putting together, and I can use that to connect and engage and communicate with them. I'm a user. I have a UX experience with the app and the device that they're entering information into. And then there's health professionals. The doctors aren't too bad with these. There's some doctors that hate it, some that like it. The dietitians are all over this stuff. They love it. Fitness is into it, and psychs like me, I tend to drag some of my peers along kicking and screaming. But these are all the users that you might have to consider if you're putting together something to track someone's thoughts and feelings and behaviours across some of those industries. And they all go by these names, and increasingly there are great opportunities in this space. I'm both an organisational or a business psychologist and someone who does clinical work. And there is a great opportunity to be doing corporate wellbeing and tracking the thoughts, the feelings and behaviours of employees and providing that information to organisations to help them make better management decisions. So we're going to go through some principles, and I'll throw in some psych talk as we go. But this is really the bumper sticker message, that when you leave tonight, and we were talking about it, this is really the outcome that you want when you're designing. Because this matches the mental model that we all use when we're talking about our thoughts, our feelings and our behaviours in our life. What information has occurred in our life and whether we think it has cause and effect. It's why the word because is so prevalent in our language. And know that also there are some really good models out there about personal informatics and about how to break it into various stages that people go through. I won't go into all the detail with this model, but underneath a lot of these stages of people getting ready for collecting, analysing and reflecting and acting on their information, there are barriers to entry for all of this spelt out in really clear ways that can make it very easy to structure and break down how you want to look at the UX experience. But I guess the first psych term we'll look at is the mere measurement effect. And what that really says is that just by merely measuring, getting people to measure, we change our behaviour. And by getting people to collect information, you'll get them reflecting and changing on their behaviour. And that leads into, I guess, the first point, which is about collecting the most relevant information. So if we look at exercise, what we know about exercise is that it's most dependent, the amount of exercise you do is most dependent on the choice of activity you do, the location, and the people around you. Now you can collect a whole bunch of information, but if you collect those three and you put those three into the user experience for this, then you're more likely to get people engaged in the activity and collecting information about the activity. And it's also important to collect some context. Context can be as simple as just having people make a little journal entry. And the example that I'll give is when I've used apps like this, I once made a journal entry about a run I did and how I enjoyed the run because I ended up at a field full of cows, and that was just interesting. I felt really good. That was memorable for me. It becomes a story and a user experience with meaning, and it's more likely to be ingrained into my behaviour. And this gentleman, who we'll all Zio, and this leads into my description about the importance of context. A lot of us forget about context. There's a lot of very good apps and mobile solutions out there that collect tons of information but provide very little context. Now, Angus provided me his data, his Zio data to have a look at. And what did I see? Well, I had trouble with it because I didn't have any context. You can see here dates and times at which he was sleeping and waking up and going to bed, and you can see me trying to put a bit of a spin on it and try and work out how it might have related to his weight. And I can see, all I could really pick out was a particular day where he went to bed at 7 and woke up at 3. But I'm asking questions about cause and effect and I don't have context. Now, in conversations with Angus at the pub, he tells me about his kids, but I don't know whether this was a particular day where the kids were fractious, he'd been up all night. I don't know what it is, I don't have the context. And the context hadn't been collected in the app as well. So for me to understand cause and effect and for him to understand it and to be able to reflect on huge amounts of data, you need to provide context to people in their user experience. Another example that's important is particularly if you're doing this for health conditions, is it's the how it's going question of context. And by that, what you can see here is a graph of my family member's mood. Again, from 0 to 10 on mood, and you can see some sharp dips there. But what you can see is that on one of them, things got pretty horrible and they felt pretty horrible. But on another, things got pretty horrible and they felt pretty good. Now, we can all identify with this. We can probably all identify with times in our life where our exercise routine was a bit crap, but we felt pretty good, or life was pretty crap, but we were coping really well. It's a really useful thing to put into the user experience, particularly if you're giving someone an app to help them deal with chronic illness or diabetes or anything that affects their life, because this is the language that we use. It's the language about how we're coping and how we're going, not necessarily about the data. This is a device called Lark, and it does dashboarding and context really, really well. And it's an example of what I was talking about. It's collecting the information, all the relevant information about when you go to sleep and when you wake up and your sleep quality, but it's got some lovely examples up there of collecting context. It gives me the objective data, it lets me say on the app whether I'm tired, and it lets me write a little diary entry about what happened that night. So in that, on the app, you've got everything you need. You're collecting the relevant information that the research says you need to make informed decisions about your behaviour and to change it and that you're interested in, and it also gives you some context. The second bit is to consider automation and manual collection. And by that, you can have people put information about their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviours into the app manually, and there's ways of automating that as well, because we all know these little mini computers we carry have sensor suites and sensor systems on them. And here's an interesting thing that might surprise some of you, is it's not always good to fully automate. If you want someone to measure and change their behaviour in the short term, you want them to be putting it in manually. You actually don't want it going in an automated fashion. The point of this might be self-evident to some of you, in that it's in the forefront of your mind. If I want to lose weight, which is never going to be an issue for me, but if I want to change my behaviour, I'm going to be recording it and thinking about it and reflecting it and getting that mere measurement effect going. But over time, that's going to become tedious, it's going to become a burden on my user experience, and so I'm going to try and automate that because my goals change. But here's a point, there's a little asterisk up there, and you want to avoid what I call sensor orgasm. Now, sensor orgasm is something that many of us may have heard in conversations where we think, wow, look at the sensor suite on this tablet, on this iPhone, it's got a GPS. Imagine if I produced a diet app where someone could take a photo of the food and it would automatically know where I am, and it would recognise the food, and then it would look up the caloric intake, and then it would cross-reference that, and you can go on and on and on. Go easy on those type of conversations. They're really great conversations to generate ideas, but you really want to come back to what it is you're meant to be collecting and what you want the user collecting in order to get the best experience and to change their behaviour. What are simple ideas about cause and effect? They're things like, if I eat fast food and I watch TV, I get fat. If I sleep well and I exercise, I'm going to have a good life. This is the way we talk. We talk in our lives in very simple cause and effect relationships about our behaviours. We don't usually go beyond more than 3 or 4 variables. We don't say, look, I reckon if I sleep well and I exercise and then I talk to my family and then I hang around people I like, and that you don't get past about 2 or 3 things in thinking about the effects in your life. It's just the nature of your brain. A lot of that happens subcortically and unconsciously. And this is important to put in experience. You don't want to overwhelm users with too many variables when you're tracking. Which is why on a mood diary, you only measure these sort of things, because this is what the research says is actually most important. So I hope you can see that some of the examples I'm giving at the top flow through this. You collect the relevant information. If you collect the relevant information, the user can make simple judgments about cause and effect in their behaviour, and they're more likely to then change that and not get overwhelmed and uncertain with the variables. And as we all know in UX, when people get overwhelmed or uncertain, the default mode is they do nothing. They disengage. And we see that in neuroscience. When the brain is overwhelmed, there's an area of the brain that just goes, right, disengage, I'm going to do nothing. It's the default mode. And you want to avoid that. There's a couple of apps and devices that do this really well. They tell a story. And if you want to design something to collect the right information and allow people to make simple relationships about cause and effect, get them to tell a story. I hate this device. I've sent it back to Amazon, but I love the way they tell their story. They say weight loss is calories burned, calories consumed, and sleep. And then they tell a lovely story about how sleep relates to the hormones of ghrelin and peptin, which relate to your satiety or your hunger, and how your brain interprets hunger. And that when you sleep, those hormones are dysregulated or messed up, and you get fatter. And it's a lovely story. It breaks it down to 3 simple things, and that's what the device measures. And it's got some basics to it as well. To give you an idea of how to use this, and some examples of this, I do a lot of work in the safety critical area. I do some work with helicopter pilots, and I do some work with drone or unmanned vehicle pilots and crew. And I'm going to be putting a range of these devices, including these sort of ones, and Fitbit, as I've shown you. And it's all about the simple cause and effect relationships that we want them to be mindful of, which is if you're stressed and you don't sleep well, you'll make poor decisions and you'll crash your aircraft into the ground or into other people, or you'll kill yourself or other people. Nice, simple discussions using devices. And so we want to pick the best devices that have the best user experience and allow us to have that conversation with people. And here's something that's a little provocative. I put all these devices on, I looked like an alien overlord, and I measured it all, and some of them aren't as accurate. What this device told me compared to what this device told me was about 2 hours out one night. But it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter unless things are really, really out. Simon Elvery was here talking about geolocation about a month ago, and he talked about the first time that his geolocation told him he flew across the Brisbane River. It was this massive error. You want to avoid those sort of things. But if you've got a device that or an app that pretty consistently measures and tracks someone's behaviour, and you provide good visualisation, information and education behind that, people will ignore errors in accuracy. And you know what? It's really the data curious people that get really hung up on comparing all these things anyway. Sharing's really important. I'm a big fan of information visualisation, and David McCandless, the UK journalist and visualisation author, has written about this. And what that's showing there is that if I was foolish enough to make a comment about my wife's weight, she's less likely to listen to me as she is to a close friend. So sharing is hugely important, particularly in changing behaviours. If people are measuring their thoughts, their feelings and their behaviours, you want to incorporate some way for them to share that information in a positive way so they can get positive peer pressure. Daily Burn does this really, really well. Another thing is to increasingly think about having some sort of API coming out of your device or your app. And here's some of the reasons why. There are a whole bunch of people putting together dashboards that let people say, okay, I'm using this device, I'm using this device for my sleep, I'm using this device for my activity, I'm using some other sort of device or app like Runkeeper, and I just want to pull it all together into one dashboard. And things like ManyBots and Sense, and they do this by pulling in the data from APIs. It's a really, and one of these will become king. I haven't really found a king dashboard out there yet for pulling together self-tracking, but one of them will become king. And if you're creating something, you want to try and get it into the king's castle, and a way of doing that is to have a good, easily accessible API around it. For example, DigiFit is one that lets you pull in data from Fitbit and from Zio and from some other devices, and it lets you look at heart rate and heart rate and biofeedback for exercise. And I'm going to be using some of this probably with some Special Forces soldiers to help them understand their heartbeat and use their heartbeat to control their stress. Because once your heartbeat gets to about 180 beats a minute, I think, your frontal lobe activation, which is where your decision making happens, starts to drop away. So we can use devices like this to help people control their heart rate in order to make better decisions. But we can do that because it's got a good dashboard and because it can feed it in. This is something that Motorola's produced. It's something that Simon Elvery did with his data too. He did some correlations and some statistics, but it's another way of dashboarding it. It's pulling in data from Withings scale, it's pulling it in from a Fitbit device. Withings is a wireless scale you can use to measure your weight. And it starts to produce correlations, and it syncs with Outlook too. So it starts to tell simple stories about cause and effect that are really common for us. I get really stressed before a meeting. That's something that's in my mind. Yeah, that's actually what's been happening. And an API is, again, a very good thing to have for this world, because increasingly you may be able to put these devices on workers, and that information can be pulled up and into a tablet on a CEO's desk. And to give you a very real concrete example of this, when I was talking to someone in the resources sector the other day, it was about some mining 11 executives who want to use apps and devices for journaling their stress. And one of the key selling points was being able to aggregate the data upwards so that a manager could see that data anonymously and make decisions and understand the stress levels of their employees. Another way of looking at it is a lot of mine sites have gate systems, electronic gate systems that physically stop people going in unless they, if the card swipes that they use show that they haven't met certain training courses. Right now, you could take one of these devices and workers at a mine site could wear it. You could feed the data out through an API and into the barrier system of the gate, so that if the person hasn't had sufficient sleep in order to operate and do their job safely, it might prevent them going onto the site. There's a whole, and there's a whole range of IR issues around that and privacy issues that might make some people cringe, but it's important considering how, if you make a self-tracking device, how it might be used corporately. And there are big bucks in it. I was talking to the Vice President of Marketing for Lark, one of the big devices for sleep, and they're going to hive off and basically have a corporate wellbeing program and a program to put these things on the US military and on people that fly aircraft and on mine sites. There's big money in it. Finally, we'll finish off this evening by really talking about visualisation, and it's ironic because this is actually where I think you should start when you're designing the experience. You should really think about the visualisation you want to be showing people, because this is where all the behaviour, insight, and the change occurs. And it's about creating visualisations for lay people. It's about creating visualisations that people understand and that they get. Because if you get it right, it'll increase collection by about up to 25%. You'll get less of a Christmas effect where people just collect stuff and then they drop away. You don't want visualisations like this. And this is one I pulled off Flickr of someone who'd put up all their Fitbit information and other self-tracking information. And they gave an explanation up there because they had to, because people like me would look at it and think, what is that all about? And so they put up an explanation and say, this is what's going on. And predictably, the user response is, I really don't understand what's going on here. You don't want visualisations like this. You want to be engaging people's visual cortex. And we've heard this adage that, that if you're engaging that system, it's effortless. It's just much quicker. A picture paints 1,000 words. And the reasons for that is that if you're too closely balanced to the thinking part of the brain and making people actually have to think about the visualisations that they're seeing, about the data that they've collected, as opposed to seeing, thinking's just neurologically it's slower, and seeing is just effortless. And I'll show you, at the end, I'll show you a visualisation that really proves this. Here's two visualisations from the same app on someone collecting information about their anxiety. That requires a lot of thinking. That's fairly effortless. You can almost look at that and immediately understand before you understand. Your brain just knows that that person has mainly had an average month with a few red days and not many good days. And then you verbalise it and understand it. It's engaging this back part of the brain. Same app, different visualisations. Because you're trying to get across a lot of information to people. People are trying to make sense of their data in terms of its history and its details and its factors and what it means in their life. And you don't have time to be putting together something that you have to explain. It's got to be effortless visualisation for them. Which is why dashboards do it really, really well. Dashboards like Fitbit do it well, so you just understand what's going on. Dashboards that show the information, allow you to look at patterns and show context. That's a dashboard for Zio. It shows some of my sleep information. We've got some journals entries there. We've got Fitbit. And anyone who uses Fitbit will tell you that initially they think they don't sit around on their arse for as long as they do, but everyone says they realise that they sit around on their arse a lot. And it's a great motivator. Finally, we look at something like Lark, which just does dashboarding so well, which pulls together all the information, showing you your sleep, the times you were awake, giving you some patterns, and then finally giving you education on what it is you have to do with it, on how you can improve it. And this is an important part of it. There's someone in this audience who I gave a Fitbit to, and they said, this is great, it gives me information on my sleep, but once I've measured my sleep, I actually just don't know what to do with it. And you know, here's information on my sleep, but I don't know how to change my sleep. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a sleep scientist. But something like Lark actually tells you what it is you have to do. LifeTick is really popular, and it's popular for measuring what you have to be doing and goals and tasks in your life, and they do dashboarding pretty well. For the really creative, sometimes you don't have to graph. Sometimes you can use colours just to represent mood and track what's going on in people's lives. And sometimes you can just use the most basic sensor suite on a tablet, which is a photo. And this is a gratitude journal, which is based on mindfulness psychology, which is based on a Buddhist type of psychology for being more present in life. Gamification's been talked about by someone else, I think, earlier in the year. When I think of gamification, I think of Skinner and rats and really basic psychology, which I call intermittent variable reward, which is just another way of saying how to put mechanics in that reward people at random times in ways that they like. Mindbloom does it pretty well. Mindbloom has a tree that represents the values in your life, and it's a tree that you grow with other friends, and you perform tasks and you get rewarded for it. Jane McGonigal, the popular games author and speaker, has made a program that arose out of a serious concussion or brain injury that she had, which gamified getting over brain injury. And she called that super better. This is a growing area. People like me are going to get more involved in it and provide advice on it. Gamify with care. Consider it as part of what you do, but don't necessarily anchor everything in it. You might get a really strong Christmas effect with people using it early on, but you'll probably get a strong drop-off. What I'll finish with is I'll top and tail this with how I started, which was a story about trying to make sense of someone's illness that was very close to me, that I loved dearly. There were ongoing struggles with trying to communicate, even though we had great dashboards through their app. And so I wanted to find other ways of continuing to do that. And so I started to look around. Because what was happening is when someone has depression and they have a poor user experience, they're going to find it really hard to use the device. The front part of your brain is where you do all your thinking and your planning about how you're going to engage with an interface, what you clicked on or where you were beforehand, and where you intend and plan to go in the future. And when you're depressed, you don't have that sort of activation in your brain. And this is a direct quote from someone when they were trying to use the app. It's pretty hard when you've got a black dog over you to be using a device, even one which has good UI. But there are ways around this. And so I went back to the brain and thinking about the brain and thinking about some of the parts of the brain that you can start to engage for good UI. And this is the part where I think dynamic visualization in apps and dynamic visualization in self-tracking is really the key and really the future coming forward. There are parts of the brain that understand what we look at. There are parts of the brain that make sense of its relationship in space. And there are parts of the brain that have an emotional reaction. And these are the ones to really engage for people. And so I started thinking, are there interfaces around that let me track and move and use elements and move them around. And I looked at Isotope, which is a jQuery visualization, and thought maybe I could be putting information in these and moving it around, but this really, the performance on this really falls away after about 20 or 80 elements. And so I kept looking around, and someone put me onto Silverlight. And there are some people in this audience who would go, Silverlight, oh, Silverlight, what is that? And it doesn't have a place. But what you're seeing here is my effort at trying to dynamically visualise 1,000 days of mood data from this same person, the same family member, as a way of giving a more richer, meaningful UX experience about their illness. And what it lets us do is create very rich semantic user experience, where the person's illness is represented as dog days, as good days, and as days that are somewhere in between, where the world's a bit fuzzy. And what we could start to do was explore the data in ways that we just couldn't. We could start to immediately see patterns. And this is what I was saying. Nearly everyone here has probably looked at this and immediately recognised that there are some patterns there. And then they have to try and explain it. That there are patterns where there's more dogs and more depression going on. And there are days where there's more sunflowers. And I iterated this with this person, and we started to tell some fairly rich stories around what was going on that let us explore their illness and its complexity, and let us see the sorts of days that they'd been having and how they'd been coping. And how their sleep might have related. And this really pulls it back, because in a confusing illness like this, you have all sorts of ideas going on about cause and effect and what is helping you and what's hindering you. And what we found was that we could start to explore the data and come up with hypotheses. We could start to say things like, show me all the days where there was depression, but coping was very high. And what was it about those days that made them better days? Was it exercise? Was it sleep? And we could start to see some optimism from what was going on as well. We could see that the number of not depressed days were increasing and the number of depressed days were decreasing over time. And this person found that they loved this. They could engage with it, they could explain it, and they started to explain their illness in some very rich ways, and talking about a field of flowers with an occasional angry black dog crunching around in it, or on days where there was mainly black dogs and just a single flower. But more importantly, we could start to establish some of the relationships that may or may not have been occurring in their health. This is, I think, the future of where a lot of dynamic visualization can go. And although it's Silverlight, there are HTML5 versions of it. They're not great, but they're doable. I guess to sum up, and this is the sort of product that I'm looking to try and create. It's one where you can upload your data and you can choose your images and you can visualise and explore it. But as I said at the start, I'm not a coder. I have some idea of how to do this. But I'm hoping to also engage with some people who could help me. It's the bumper sticker message and some of the principles you need to consider. And there's some good websites that you can check out, including my own. Thanks for your time today, and what I'll finish off by saying is that it's really common for me at some of these talks. I was in the UK in February, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, you know what, I've been a UX designer all my life, and I helped design some of the major papers, but what my passion really is the fact that I have diabetes, and I want to design something that's going to help people with diabetes. have a better experience in managing their illness. And if you're in that club as well, that club of people who think that there's some way they could use their skills to find other meaning in what they do and helping other people, then I'm always happy to have that conversation. Maybe we can help each other out as well. Thanks very much.
Any questions?
Yep.
Sam, it's Russell here. Can you just explain a bit more about the
No. It's very robust. Essentially, it's an activity device. And to give you an idea, to compare it, this is one that's been around for ages. This is like a medical or a research device that's about $1,600 and about $1,500 software to use it. This is exactly the same device that now costs $100, and they both use accelerometers to measure your activity through the day. Except this does visualisations for the user, and this is really only for someone like me. Anything else? Look forward to talking to you at the pub afterwards. Thanks very much.
Good evening, everybody. As Bruce said, my name is Warwick Kay. I'm a user experience designer. And today I wanted to talk about how we go about measuring a user's experience. We are all familiar with measuring web traffic, app traffic, that sort of thing. So I want to take that a little bit further and talk about how we use that data and also other methods to measure an experience. So first key thing is, and this is a lot of the times understated within companies, we need to figure out who the user is. A lot of people will say, oh, I know who my users are. Yeah, but you really need to look into this and spend some time on it. Most people will obviously say, it shouldn't be this guy. Sorry about the bad stock photography, but this guy is obviously frustrated with an application. He's angry, he's stressed. It's not the end user that you want to be. I call them happy users. He's not your happy user, obviously, but why? Secondly, should it be this? Should it be this person here? And this is extremely close to one of your stock photos. So I ask, is this a happy user? Is this what you want your users to be? Anybody? No, yes? Yes. Yes? I say no. This lady is excited. She's obviously got through, she's overjoyed. She only gets those kind of emotions when you get through something difficult. You finish with the Olympics, you come first, you're overjoyed. That's great because you put so much hard work into it. If it was easy, you wouldn't be putting your hands in the air and celebrating. And that's where a lot of people think happy users say they're happy users. Most people that I class as happy users are this guy. He is so confident in himself and so happy, he doesn't even know it. He's just like, I'm a pro at this. This was the easiest thing in the world. I don't know what X person was talking about when they said it was hard. That application that they've just used, he doesn't even have to worry about it. Next person that walks into the room, he's going to tell them, he's going to scream that application's name and scream it from the rooftop. Can't remember what I was meant to say there. But it's just easy. He doesn't even think about it. And that's where you want to get your happy users. Those ones that are so excited that they ring you up and tell you how good your product are, or how well they did, they're the ones that deep down they actually had an issue that they overcame. And that's a great thing that they overcame it, and it's good that your application allowed them to do that, but you want to get rid of those burdens so they just don't know what they're using, and they just think they're good and that there's no stress in the world. So how we go about finding out these users? Everybody's application is different and everybody has different users. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how to find out how your happy user is. But it is a big part of user experience, is knowing who your user is and knowing the goals and the way you want to turn those people into happy users. So, yeah, I can't answer that, but I can tell you it's extremely important. So, first of all, this is now into the measuring side of things. So we know where we want to get our users. We know we have some happy users already, and we have some angry users, and we have some overexcited users that stress with the product but work their way through it. So first of all, these are a range of UI metrics that we've probably got data on already. Most of us would probably use, I'm talking web apps here, I don't have a huge deal of experience with mobile, but most of us already use Google Analytics, then there's a couple of other ones out there. They correlate this data, so completion rates, they're great. They're good for e-commerce and everything like that, but you want to think about, if you're not coming from an e-commerce side, what is the completion of a happy user? When they come to your website, what are they looking for? They might be looking for a phone number. So your completion rate might be a call to a 1-800 number that you specifically set up for your website, so you know you've got so many users. They might be clicking on a contact us. That could be their completion rate. But you need to think about what you want your users to get out of your website. Usability problems. These are simple little problems that people overcome. So that sort of comes about, and you find those out using task times, first click analysis and that sort of thing. So those you want to look at your analytics and figure out. Task time's a good one to be monitoring. We might think we want everybody in our application 100% of the time, and that might be a business goal. We want more people to use our application more of the time, more often. That's great, but realistically, when you're sitting at your desk, how often do you open up an application thinking, I'm going to spend hours in here just because it's fun? You want to get in, get your work done and get out, because you don't want to really be doing work, hard work or whatever kind of work. You want to be out of work, having fun, chatting to people. So task time's a good one to try to lower. You might want to increase overall time in the application, but you want to lower task time. First click. Range of studies show that if people get the first click wrong when they're trying to do a task, that 70% of them will fail. So once they head down that wrong path, then they're pretty much doomed. So you want to be able to track first clicks. And a lot of this stuff you can do once you've got your task and goal set up. You can do this within Google Analytics, but you need to understand these things before you can really measure if you've got happy users or angry users. Page views and clicks, it's pretty obvious. Conversions, unfortunately, is very close to completion rate, and errors. So a lot of websites, I always find, they never track errors, validation errors. Does anybody track how often their forms have validation errors? Yeah. That is actually quite a big thing, because if you've got a simple sign-up form and 50% of your users are getting something wrong on that form every time, then you need to have a look at it and do something about that. And that's simply by trying to track through, I'm not a programmer, but through programming methods, how to track if errors are popping up on forms. So all that sort of tracking is giving you an amount of data that you can then use to improve your application. And this is a really good starting point. But, oh, there we go, sorry. Talked about Google Analytics. ClickTail and MouseFlow are two really good ones to capture screens. I've got a link to these at the end, like with a page, so you don't have to worry about recording them. But ClickTails and MouseFlow are two really good ones that capture screen and mouse movement, so you can see things like first click and where they're going wrong. So you can go and have a look at users and go, okay, I can see he went into this avenue, which is incorrect. So we've got to do something about that because this is one of our major tasks. And so many more. I've got a page with a link to a whole heap of them. But, as I was saying, there's an issue. Tracking the user it's tracking our goals. We might have an application that has, for me, at least a free trial, for example. The goal within the company is to get everybody that comes to our public website to sign up for that free trial. That's great. And then once they've signed up, the goal within the company is to get everybody to upgrade, to give us money, because that's what a company wants. It's not what the user wants. For my application, the user wants to send out a really nice email and have it look good in their inbox. That's it. They want to get in there and they want to experience that application. But we're in there tracking things like free trial sign up, conversions, and all that sort of thing. And so that's tracking our goals. It's not tracking what the user wants. Putting big upgrade now buttons in their way might be good and might sound really good from a sales point of view, but until you've proved to that user and made them into a happy user, they're not going to upgrade. or look, they might, which would be great, but in a real world, they're going to have a look at you, they're going to have a look at a couple of other parties, and they're going to compare. So you need to show them as easily as possible how they can achieve their goals within your application. So those UI metrics, they do great, but they track our goals mainly. But they are a very good starting point. If you're doing all that UI stuff, you're doing a lot more than most people. And it's getting you a fair way into getting a happy user. Task metrics, these are very similar to UI, but they're a little bit more interaction with the user. So we talked about before interacting with, tracking them with conversions and that sort of thing. We've got here task level surveys, micro surveys and live help. Unfortunately, live help and micro surveys have been bastardized by the general population by putting them on there. I went to a website the other day and I was genuinely having a look to see if I wanted to use this for work. Within 2 seconds, a micro survey popped up and said, what do you think of our application? And then over the top of that, a live help popped up saying, do you need any help? I hadn't even got off the home page yet. I just turned around and left. So that's the bad thing about micro surveys and live helps. And micro surveys are the little ones that pop up and say something like, do you think our pricing plans are fair? Or something like that. The good thing you can use them is you can tell, most of these applications can tell you how long a user's been on your site, and through the UI metrics you might know your pricing page is the biggest hurdle that people have to get over before signing up. So you figure out, I want to put a micro survey or live help on there that pops up if anybody's sitting on the pricing page for more than 5 minutes. Now at that point they're probably frustrated and not quite understanding with where your pricing is going, so that live help pops up, you're like, they're more inclined to use it because it's at a time when they want to use it, not at a time when they've just got there and they haven't quite digested everything. So through those UI metrics you want to have a look at how you better use things like micro surveys and live help. Task level surveys, these are good if you've got an application that you can go, the user has to go from A to Z through a process. So at the end of the process, if you want to gauge how your application's going, you have a task level survey. It's just a quick thing that says, how difficult did you rate this? 1 to 10, and then a comments box. Now the comments box is great, we heard about good for context. 1 to 10 is storing a 1 to 10 or a dislike to really like or whatever is fantastic. It'd be great for the boss when you can walk in there and say, over the last 6 months, everybody's the enjoyment of doing X task has increased, but you can't give it any context if it goes the opposite way, if it goes down. And that's where little comment box, and a lot of people, if they've either gone through a task and done it successfully, they want to tell you about it because they're proud of what they've done, especially if they've had that little bit of hurdle along the way that's got them a little bit frustrated, they've got over it. And then you've got the angry user, and everybody knows the angry user is quite happy to tell you what you've done wrong. So that sort of context helps out. So these 3 other ways that go beyond normal analytics. But this may tell you something is wrong, but not what in any great detail. So we're talking about context. The little box, it's great, it's good for context, and it's good to get you, again, another long way along to getting a really happy user. But again, the problem is it doesn't really give you an ongoing relationship with that user that you can go back and you can work things through. You might know their details and you might go down that path, but this is where I get around to what is the real solution of measuring users. And so many of us hate doing this. A lot of us come from IT, design, development backgrounds, sit in front of the computer, that's where I come from as well, but basically it's talk to your users. Set up surveys, beta groups, talk to them on email, get a rapport. So small business, this isn't normally a problem, and they're normally the ones that are in touch with their users more because they're talking to them on the phone. There might only be 3 staff. Everybody has an interaction with their users. But once you get into larger business, these things, everything gets automated. And that's great because it increases sales, it decreases support, it does all that, but you lose touch with what the users are. And especially when delivering larger applications, that can be a problem. So 2 great tools that don't require a lot of talking are surveys, and they're the NPS and SUS survey. The NPS is the Net Promoter Score. It's used a lot in business, but it's used a lot with UI as well, and it's a good way to test if people are happy with your service in general. The SUS is the System Usability Scale. Now this one I've always wanted to use, and I have to be true, I've never actually used it, but it looks fantastic. And it is 10 quick questions that provide a measurement on perceived usability. And basically it's just a ranking 1 to 10, very similar to the NPS, but it gives you more of a targeted on your interface, on your application. So that one, I'm in the process of working through putting it in place at work, and it does look, it's a really quick application, quick survey, but it gives you that targeted towards the interface, whereas an NPS, the normal one question is how likely are you to recommend this to your friends or family? And it's 1 to 10. 9 and 10 are promoters, 8 and 7 are neutral, and everything below 7 is a detractor. And you just keep doing that survey. It comes with a comments box, so you get context as well, but you continue to do that survey to see if your application's improving over time. So second step, once you've got a survey in place or some way to gather data of users that want to talk to you, set up what I call it a beta group. It's not a very good name for it, but I didn't know what else to call it. Basically a group of people that you know, your average users, and that like to talk to you, that you have a rapport with. And this is where real measurement comes in. You start talking to users, you start getting them to do user tests. There's a bunch of applications online, usertesting.com, for example, that allow you to run a test and they can use the application and it records and their voice, their face, and the screen obviously, that help. So get that rapport with people, and that's how you really will start to understand if people are really happy and being a happy user. The good thing is, angry users, they're normally the most passionate users you have. They are frustrated, but they really enjoy your product. They're there talking to you, but they're angry. Like, how often do you get annoyed at something and just leave? So if you have an angry user talking to you, I know it might be hard to listen to them, but they are a very valuable source. If you have an application or a service, they are a very valuable source to listen to and improve the user experience. Email and phone, I say talk to users, but there's only actually one on there that involves talking, but that's just coming from a tech background. So these are great. Phone and in person are really good to get a rapport. What you'll do is you'll end up getting users that feel they own the application or website. It's harder with websites. I do say I come from an application background, but even with the e-commerce websites and websites where they have to put details in, there's a level of ownership there, and that they will start believing in your application. And we even had it at work where we've got a beta group running, and I'm talking to these users quite often, and we had a release with some new features in it, and the beta group member knew it was coming because we'd tested with them, we'd talked to them, and another member that isn't in the beta group posted on what we call our knowledge centre, saying, oh, what's this, how does it work and everything. That beta group member, because they felt they owned it, they went back and responded to that person. They went back and did our job basically for us. And that is so much more powerful than us just telling them, because they're like, oh, this is a third party telling us why this new feature is cool and why this new feature is going to benefit us. So it's that sort of empowering that is a knock-on effect from talking to your users. So in summary, I think that was actually quicker than I thought it was going to be. In summary, you want to track your UI metrics. So this is the core where it all begins. Actually, I've missed one, sorry. You want to figure out who your happy user is. It might be hard if you have a public website, or if you do work for clients, you freelance or work at an agency, it's hard to figure out who your happy user is. But you also have to try, and talking to the client or talking to the owner of the business, they have a moderate understanding of it as well. So then start putting in ways to track. Don't just add analytics to a website. Set up goals, set up things that are going to impress your clients or impress your boss or impress whoever you are. So those major goals of tracking conversions, recording tasks and setting up what tasks that you want to track, and recording their first click and which way they go, etc. First click is more difficult because you only figure out what task they want to do after they've finished it, so trying to figure out what their first click is can be a bit tricky. But you can get there, especially with things like mouse flow and ClickTails. That's much easier, but they are both paid services. Be smart about how you get feedback. Don't just go, we need to put some live help or a micro survey on the website, and then the developer comes along, sticks it in the footer, sweet, it's on there, pops up every 5 seconds on every page, annoys your users. And you see it everywhere, and it's the same with the email pop-up. You go to a lot of blogs, they pop up the first 2 seconds asking for your email to subscribe to the network. I haven't even read the blog post yet. I don't even know if it's a good blog post. Why would I be subscribing? So you've got to think of where the user state of mind is, and you sort of get a lot of that from the UI metrics, and then you implement it with the tasks and the how you actually talk to your users. And finally, talk to your users. It is, if you have a good rapport and you're able to happily converse with user, even if they're annoyed at you, you will find out so much more information from just discussing things with them, and try to get them to talk about their problems, not their solutions. So many users, and probably everybody's had it, have rung up and said, you should do X. Now there's a thing called the 5 whys, which is you attempt to ask why 5 times, and if the user can explain themselves to you, why 5 times, then you have got out all the information you were possibly going to get out. So if a user asks you, you should do X, you say why. And then they give you a little bit of the problem and you say why. And then it turns out that they want to do something totally different, but the only way they found out to do it in your application is through using some obscure channel. And so you turn around and give them a much better solution, because in the end, we're there to provide solutions, not just do what they tell us. So that did go very quickly. So I will say thank you. I will put a little side note, a little advertisement for me. I'm also talking on using intelligent design in your emails at the Email Marketing Summit in October. That's through work as well, as they do email marketing. So, questions? Yeah?
Do you find, typically I find a developer, sort of customer, they want to tell them how they should be using it, rather than the customer actually tells them what they're doing. Do you find it has to be done, like I find talking component, you just start explaining to them why you made that design decision rather than listening to how.
Yeah. Basically he asked if you found developers would try to tell them and walk them through how to use something rather than figuring out what their problem is. Yes, very much so. Good thing, you want to use services like ClickTails, Mouse, whatever it was, and also user testing. I find it really good with my developers. I've introduced them to watching user testing videos and then they're like, why are they doing that? What? No, why did they click over there? That's just ridiculous. Why would anybody click on that? And then they start to understand that not everybody uses the application the way they envisaged it. And so you need to sort of introduce context into a developer's life as well as into your life by getting results. So that being said, at work I'm the one talking to clients, not really developers. And I sort of come from a developer background, but I've talked to clients my whole life. I've worked in small business since I was 14. But yeah, it is a bit of a, you've got to understand that the user has a problem and you need to get that problem out of there. Just telling them how it's going to work isn't solving their problem. And that's sort of what you've got to get across to people who are talking to it, even support people and everything like that. Even if there is a way to do it, you might show them and they might go, that's fantastic, but they might just go, that is really fantastic, I didn't know that existed ever, thank you very much, bye. And they'll be the happiest user in the world. But there is some sort of underlying problem there that you need to get out from them. So, anybody else? Yeah, at the back, sorry.
Warwick, to what extent have you found that incentivising results works? I.e., if you fill in this survey, you go into a drawer, or however that works. It's very honourable for us to fill in a consumer survey, but
yeah.
there's nothing in it for you.
I find there's 2 ways you can do it. Well, there's 3. Don't incentivise at all. Build your core beta group. Build the people that want to get invested in the product. That is probably the most rewarding way for you, but it's the hardest. You're really going to have to search for users. You're going to have to troll support calls and stuff and find those users that are willing to give feedback and then ring them up and say, did you want to become in a beta group? You get to see new releases before everybody else. And so there's little incentives in just generally being, well, from where I work in our beta group. We've tried 2 other ways. One is basically saying win X or get free credits or get whatever by answering this survey. That's good, but basic human, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but they want to expect that every time. So when your next survey, when there's not something free, you get a drop in results. The other way is the excitement and unexpected reward, which I love because I love seeing the reaction of users when they get it. And that's just give them something free at the end. Don't tell them about it. Reward those ones that are doing it out of the goodness of their own heart and they're giving up their time. So at the end you say, thank you very much for the survey, here's 20 free SMS credits, which we've done in the past sort of thing. And that one makes them talk about it. Unfortunately, they probably won't talk about it with other users unless they're on social networks. Then they start tweeting about it and Facebooking and post on your Facebook walls, say thank you, because they've experienced that unexpected result. And that's like, it's the same as you walking to work and one of the guys or one of the girls has got you a coffee and you're like, sweet, it's unexpected, you didn't expect that, but you get that awesome feeling just by that person's got you a coffee. And you suddenly have this emotional contract with this person to get them a coffee next time you go and get a coffee. So it's a very similar result. So it's hard. Yeah. Yeah, well, but test and see how your users go. The good thing about doing repetitive surveys and talking to users all the time is you can try different methods and see what the results are. So, and there's a lot of reading out there on surveys and writing good questions and giving rewards, etc. as well. Carol? It's difficult, but the good thing about getting context is, in the end, most companies understand that their money's coming from their users. And if you can give them context that 50% of their users are hitting this problem or recording even just an issue, it might not even be the same issue, they're going to start listening to that over time. So, yeah, most people like to listen to their users, even if, how do I say it, even if they still want to track conversions and they still want to get more upgrades. Ideally, if it's a better user experience, you're going to get more upgrades by a knock-on effect because people are going to go through that process and go, this is awesome, this is fantastic, it was so easy, I'm sitting back, I'm a happy user sort of thing. And then they're going to go, I can't live without this product, so I'm going to upgrade. So it is that proving and giving something to them first before they're willing to give you their money. So, but it is difficult trying to get them to remove the really big upgrade now button and stuff like that because they think it's working. But then there's tools like A/B testing. There's cool ones where you can only test 20% of everything. So you go, look, at worst case scenario, you're only going to lose 10% for the month. And then it turns out to be better, and so you put it in, A/B testing, say 20% of the market, 20% of the hits on X page, you're producing you're serving up 2 different options. So at worst case, 10% of those people that they may have upgraded and they don't because your option turns out worse. Most of the time, if you've got the user in mind, in my experience, the option turns out better because it's improving that user experience for them. Anybody else? Bruce?
So do you run your surveys constantly through the application?
No. Yes and no. The NPS and the SUS, well, I haven't put the SUS in place yet, but the NPS we only run once a year, and it goes out to everybody, and it gives us a nice broad overview of how everything's going. And the SUS I want to run to groups of say 500 members and try to get back roughly about 50%, which would be great. But again, I haven't put that in place. Task surveys, questionnaires at the end of processes. We have done when we have we work in quick agile sprints, so we know 3 months down the track that we want to be working on X, so we might put a task level survey in on X 3 months and try to find out sort of where the sore points are. And that's where I come in. I work before the development team. I come in and sort of work everything out, set these metrics up, decide what's wrong, produce new ways to improve it, and then I go on to the next thing while the development team puts it in place. So we pop them up and we take them down. We try not to, again, don't annoy your users. Don't have every page have a survey on it. Just go, okay, this month we want to improve X. And try to get down on your core, what your core product is, and always try to be improving that core product, because that's what they're there for. So, I think.
I was going to ask about micro surveys that you just answered.
Oh, cool. Anybody else? Yes?
Would you say your clients were small and medium-sized businesses? They probably tend to nose up towards a survey or a live chat. I was just wondering what would be, say, your top three, just in terms of targeting happy users and getting those results.
Yep. So I'd say a small to medium-sized business that has no great conversion funnel. Oh, sorry, he said, what's top 3 tips for small to medium websites and how to improve them, sort of thing. So,
It was more like, I suppose, because it wouldn't be conversing with clients or customers. It's almost like trying to track if they're happy and if
Yep.
they're able to navigate some ways.
yeah, so trying to track if they're happy on websites that you don't have a place to talk to users. So, yeah, so I guess first of all is the UI metrics. Getting tracking all your conversions, your task times, and even just your time on site. For a small to medium-sized business that's just a brochureware site, so they're just providing information to their customers, there might be a blog, etc. Time on site being increased is a good thing instead of decreased, because you want to increase traffic. What you would do then, what I would normally do, or suggest to someone, would be do user tests, set up, you're a user, go search for us on Google and find out X about us. See how long that takes. Do say 3 or 4 of them, average that out and say this is the task time it takes to do X, which is one of the things we say our clients are going to be doing. And so then you know that task time on your website from a competent user, like you get someone that's tech savvy or someone that knows how to use a computer. And then you benchmark how your general users are going against that time. And you might even just do it internally, just get the salespeople or the admin staff to come and browse around the website. So the problem is there's no real task, and so there's no way to really improve it. So it is more, this is a lot more UI focused and application focused, but yeah, really just benchmarking and looking at that and trying to figure out how long and how much interaction you want with your clients. That figuring out is the hard bit. Figuring out if they're a happy user, I guess contact rates and interactions, comments on blogs, that sort of thing. Benchmark your competitors and how many comments they're getting and how many comments you're getting, interactions on Facebook, and so all that data that you can then benchmark and try to compare. But brochureware sites and public sites are probably the hardest thing to actually track, because you just want people to come and use your product. You don't have a funnel or something that you can actually visualize and put in place. So, anybody else? No? Fantastic. I'll be going back to the pub, so any more questions you can just ask me there. Thank you very much.